Move that pathetic display immediately. The screech cut through the memorial service like a chainsaw through silk. I looked up from my daughter's casket to see Brenda Hutchins, HOA Compliance Director, marching across sacred ground in her power suit and designer heels. This unauthorized gathering ends now. You're violating 17 separate community aesthetic codes. She jabbed a manicured finger at Father Matthews, who stood frozen mid-prayer, his hands still raised in blessing over my 8-year-old Emma's tiny coffin. Wrap it up, Padre. I don't care what you're doing. White Oak Preserve has standards, and this circus is creating visual pollution that affects property values. Her BMW idled behind her, door hanging open, exhaust fouling the October air. Besides, that coffin color wasn't pre-approved by the Architectural Review Board. Lavender violates Section 4.12 of our aesthetic guidelines. What she didn't know was that the judge, standing silently among the mourners, would give her 8 years in prison for what happened next. My name is Marcus Chen, a software developer who believes in documentation and evidence. Standing at Mountain View Memorial Park in Boulder County, Colorado that October day, watching my baby girl's casket being carried toward the earth, I couldn't fix anything. Not her leukemia, not the 2 years of hospitals and false hopes, not the way my wife Diana's hand trembled in mine. Then Brenda Hutchins's BMW 7 Series jumped the curb. The luxury sedan bounced over the cemetery border, rolling forward until its front tire rested squarely on Emma's burial plot. The collective gasp from our family and friends was almost a scream. Diana's grip on my hand went from tight to crushing. Father Matthews stopped mid-sentence, his prayer book nearly slipping from his hands. Brenda stepped out in an ivory pantsuit, surveying the area like a general inspecting a battlefield. She walked directly to Father Matthews, her heels leaving divots in the sacred earth. I need everyone to understand that this event is in direct violation of White Oak Preserve Code Section 12.7 regarding unpermitted assemblies, she announced loudly. This display is creating aesthetic disruption that impacts community visual standards. Diana was already moving. Her phone came out, the red recording indicator appearing. Keep talking, Diana said, quietly, deadly calm. Please keep talking. Brenda pulled a laminated badge from her jacket. I am Brenda Hutchins, acting in my official capacity as Compliance Director. This is a compliance inspection. You have 5 minutes to disperse before I issue formal citations to every participant. She shushed Father Matthews. A finger-to-lips gesture at a Catholic priest in the middle of a child's funeral. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Then Brenda pressed her key fob. The hazard lights began to flash. Blink, blink, blink. Orange strobes washing over Emma's burial plot, over the tiny lavender casket, over the flowers. My father took a step forward, fists clenched. I raised my hand. Not yet. Not here. Not in front of Emma. I looked at Deanna. She was still recording, her face cold, calculating, dangerous. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about justice. Sometimes it's documented, systematic, and built one piece of evidence at a time until it becomes unassailable. The police arrived within 8 minutes of Diana's call. Later, we'd learned that the 911 dispatcher had escalated the call to priority status when Diana calmly stated, "A woman has driven her vehicle onto my daughter's burial plot during the funeral service and is refusing to leave." 2 Boulder County Sheriff's deputies, Martinez and Sullivan, approached with the careful neutrality of professionals walking into a volatile situation. Brenda saw them coming and immediately shifted into performance mode. This was her element. She was the kind of person who viewed police as her personal enforcement arm, summoned to discipline people who refused to recognize her authority. She strode toward them with aggressive confidence, her fake compliance badge swinging from her neck like a medal of honor. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth and manufactured authority. "I am Brenda Hutchins, Official Compliance Director for the White Oak Preserve Homeowners Association." She thrust her laminated badge toward them like it was a federal shield. I'm conducting a mandatory compliance inspection. This unauthorized gathering violates multiple sections of our community covenants, and these people have been completely uncooperative with standard enforcement procedures. She handed Deputy Martinez a thick document she'd pulled from a leather folder in her car. It was several pages long, printed on expensive, heavyweight paper with an official-looking eagle seal at the top. Later, forensic analysis would show it was created in Microsoft Word using Times New Roman font and a clip art eagle downloaded from a free graphics website. As you can see from these certified HOA documents, she continued with practiced authority. This property falls within White Oak Preserve jurisdiction, and all activities conducted by residents must comply with our architectural and aesthetic guidelines. I've personally documented 17 separate violations occurring here today. Deputy Martinez, a stocky man in his 40s with kind eyes that had probably seen too much human cruelty, took the document and glanced at it. His expression remained carefully neutral, but I saw his eyes track from the paper to the casket draped in flowers, to Father Matthews still holding his prayer book, to the gathered mourners dressed in black. This wasn't a block party or an unpermitted assembly. This was a funeral. Deputy Sullivan, younger with sharp eyes, was scanning the scene with different focus. She was looking at Brenda's BMW, at the precise tire placement, at the fresh ruts carved into the cemetery grass. "Ma'am," Deputy Martinez said slowly, handing the document back to Brenda with careful professionalism, "this is a public cemetery, county property. Your HOA covenants don't extend to county-owned land. Your authority ends at the subdivision boundary." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. "Officer, I think you'll find that the White Oak Preserve Covenant is extraordinarily comprehensive in its scope. It includes all properties within the designated district, including public spaces that create visual impact for our residents. I have the legal authority to enforce compliance standards anywhere that affects our community's aesthetic integrity and property values." She was so confident, so absolutely certain of her power and authority. It would have been fascinating to watch if it weren't so horrifying. Diana stepped forward, still holding her phone with the red recording indicator visible. "Officers," she said calmly, her voice cutting through Brenda's blustering with quiet steel. "My name is Diana Chen. We are burying our 8-year-old daughter today." This woman drove her vehicle onto my daughter's burial plot, interrupted the funeral service, and is now claiming she has legal authority to shut down a funeral. She turned the phone screen toward them, her hand perfectly steady. "I have video of everything that happened." The deputies leaned in to watch the small screen. The footage was only 30 seconds, but it was absolutely damning. The sound of the BMW's engine growing louder, the collective gasp of mourners as the tire settled onto the plot, Brenda's loud, abrasive voice cutting through the sacred prayers. "Wrap it up. Padre, I don't care what you're doing." The shushing gesture, the hazard lights beginning their obscene strobing. When the video ended, Deputy Sullivan's professional mask had cracked completely. Her jaw was tight, her eyes hard with barely suppressed anger. "Ma'am, we need you to move your vehicle immediately," Deputy Sullivan said, her tone no longer patient or neutral. "You're trespassing on county property and you're disrupting a funeral service. That's a misdemeanor at minimum. I will not be moving my vehicle until this area is cleared and brought into compliance with community standards," Brenda announced, folding her arms across her chest in defiance. "I am acting in my official capacity as an HOA enforcement officer, and I have the legal authority to conduct inspections and enforce regulations. If you attempt to interfere with my official duties, I'll be contacting the county commissioner to file a formal complaint about police overreach and harassment." That's when I finally found my voice. It came out hoarse, scraped raw by grief and rage barely contained. "Check under her tire," I said quietly. Both deputies turned to look at me. "Check what her tire did to the burial vault." Deputy Martinez walked slowly to the front of Brenda's gleaming BMW. He crouched down, his knees popping softly in the cemetery quiet. He pulled a small LED flashlight from his belt and aimed it under the vehicle, peering closely at the spot where the tire met the earth and the burial equipment. We all watched him, in absolute silence, the world holding its breath. He stayed crouched there for a long moment that felt like an eternity, moving the flashlight beam slowly back and forth, examining the damage with careful attention. Then he slowly stood up, took his hat off, and ran his hand through his short-cropped hair in a gesture of pure disbelief and frustration. He turned to his partner and gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head that conveyed everything. Then he looked at Brenda Hutchins, and all the professional neutrality was completely gone from his face. It was replaced by cold, hard anger that made his voice drop low and dangerous. "Ma'am," he said quietly, each word precisely enunciated, "you didn't just drive onto a burial plot. That concrete support bracket is part of a burial vault lowering mechanism. That's not cosmetic damage, that's structural damage to burial equipment. In the state of Colorado, that constitutes desecration of a burial site under CRS 189113. That's a Class 5 felony carrying 1 to 3 years in prison." Brenda's smug, confident smile finally vanished from her face. A flicker of genuine panic crossed her features as the reality began to penetrate. "That's absolutely ridiculous," she stammered, her voice losing its authority. "If there's any damage, it was probably already there before I arrived. This is clearly shoddy workmanship by the cemetery maintenance staff. You can't possibly hold me responsible for pre-existing conditions." But Deputy Martinez wasn't listening to her explanations anymore. He was already walking toward her with deliberate purpose, his hand reaching for the handcuffs on his belt with practiced efficiency. "Ma'am, you were explicitly told this was an active burial service. You were asked multiple times to leave. You refused. And you caused measurable damage to a burial plot during a funeral. Brenda Hutchins, you are under arrest for felony desecration of a burial site, criminal trespass on county property, and disruption of a funeral service." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut around Brenda's wrists was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life. It echoed across the silent cemetery, a sharp metallic punctuation mark at the end of a nightmare sentence. Brenda's face went through a rapid cascade of emotions: shock, rage, fear, indignation, disbelief, all cycling across her features in the span of seconds. "You can't do this to me!" she shrieked, her voice cracking and rising to a pitch that bordered on hysteria. "I am the HOA president! I have rights! I have authority! I was performing my official duties! I will have your badges for this. I'll sue the department. I know the county commissioner personally. This is discrimination. This is harassment. This is an abuse of power." The deputies ignored her protest completely, each taking one of her arms with professional detachment and walking her toward their patrol car. The fake compliance badge she'd been so proud of swung from her neck, catching the light as she twisted and pulled against their grip. Her expensive heels dug furrows in the grass as she resisted, leaving a trail of destruction even in her arrest. "This is outrageous. I demand to speak to your supervisor. I demand to speak to my attorney. You have no right to treat me like a common criminal." Deputy Sullivan opened the back door of the patrol car with one hand while maintaining her grip on Brenda's arm. As they guided her inside, Brenda looked back at us one final time, her face twisted with fury and utter disbelief at how her moment of authority had transformed so completely into her own arrest. The door closed with a solid, final thunk that felt like justice beginning. Her BMW remained behind on the cemetery grass, hazard lights still faithfully blinking their orange strobes. Blink, blink, blink. What had been meant as symbols of her dominance and authority now became something else entirely. Evidence of her crime, documented and undeniable. Markers of the exact moment when her manufactured power structure began to collapse. The cemetery staff apologized and inspected the vault. The crack in the support bracket was real. They would replace the entire assembly before we proceeded. It would take 3 hours. We waited, sitting vigil over Emma's casket, refusing to leave her. When Father Matthews finally completed the prayers, the sun was setting, the aspens glowed gold, and the mountains were backlit with orange and purple. Emma would have loved it. We went home to a house that felt empty, but now joined by something else: cold, focused determination. We had evidence, witnesses, and a system that could deliver consequences. The first violation notice appeared 2 days after the funeral. Diana found it tucked into our front door. A crisp white envelope bearing the HOA seal. Inside was a citation for Section 7.14, Atmospheric Grief Contamination. The emotional atmosphere emanating from 2847 Pinewood Court is creating a psychological burden on neighboring properties. The persistent aura of mourning violates the White Oak Preserve standard of maintaining cheerful community energy. Fine, $75 per day. Atmospheric grief contamination. She was fining us for being sad our daughter was dead. She's insane, Diana whispered. No, I said. She's vindictive. She thinks we'll be too grief-stricken to fight back. I pulled out a folder and labeled it Hutchins, Evidence Archive. I slipped the notice in and photographed it. Timestamp visible. We document everything. The notices kept coming with relentless, calculated cruelty. The day after memorial display excess for flowers on our porch, we received insufficient blade vitality for our lawn. Not that the grass was too long or unmowed, we'd literally had it professionally cut the day before Emma's funeral. No, according to Brenda's citation, our grass was displaying melancholy chlorophyll levels that failed to meet the HOA's newly invented vibrancy standards. The notice included a detailed color comparison chart with swatches ranging from optimistic green to depressive sage, with our lawn apparently falling into the unacceptable grief green category. $100 per day until the lawn's emotional state improved. Each bizarre, increasingly deranged citation went meticulously into our expanding folder. Diana photographed each one from multiple angles, documented the exact time and location of discovery, cross-referenced the cited code sections against the actual HOA covenant, and maintained a running spreadsheet that was becoming a masterclass in documenting systematic harassment. Then came non-optimized driveway usage, because my car was parked exactly 3 inches further forward than the HOA's newly invented depression prevention parking protocol required. The citation included a detailed diagram showing the psychologically harmful positioning of my vehicle and explaining how forward-parked cars created visual pessimism for passing residents. Fine, $75 per day. We were cited for temporal non-compliance because we'd allegedly missed the deadline to comment on a proposed zoning change affecting our property, a deadline for a hearing we'd never been notified about regarding a zoning change that didn't actually exist in any county records. Fine, $150 for failure to participate in phantom civic engagement. Most cruelly, we got a notice for unapproved remembrance activities because Diana had planted a small rose bush in our backyard, in our fenced, completely private backyard that wasn't visible from any neighboring property, as a living memorial to Emma. According to Brenda's citation, the rosebush constituted an unauthorized memorial installation that violated Section 9.7 regarding grief expression limitations and created emotional pollution that could seep into neighboring yards. The notice demanded immediate removal of the rosebush and included helpful suggestions for approved non-emotional landscaping alternatives. Fine. $200 plus mandatory removal costs. Diana stood in our kitchen holding that particular notice, and I watched something fundamental change in her face. The grief was still there. It would always be there, a permanent resident in our hearts. But it was being joined and reinforced by something else entirely. Something cold and purposeful and absolutely implacable. I'm going to destroy her. Deanna said quietly, her voice carrying the kind of calm certainty that comes from absolute commitment. Not with violence, not with revenge, not with anything that will make us like her, but with evidence and law, and consequences. I'm going to document every single illegal thing she does, build an unassailable case, and then I'm going to hand her over to the legal system she thinks protects her authority. She went to her computer and created a new cloud folder with military-grade encryption that would require 3 separate passwords and biometric verification to access. She set up automatic backups to 3 different cloud services, Google Drive, Dropbox, and a specialized legal document storage system. She created a detailed spreadsheet with columns for date discovered, violation type, fine amount, photo evidence, witness names, cross-reference to actual HOA covenant, notes on fabrication, and links to supporting documentation. She was building a prosecutorial database. My brilliant, methodical wife was systematically turning grief and rage into something that could be weaponized effectively in a court of law. Over the next 2 weeks, the citations continued to arrive with disturbing regularity. We were fined for acoustic sadness because Diana had been playing Emma's favorite lullabies in our house, and somehow Brenda had determined that the music was projecting grief sounds that violated noise ordinance, Section 11, for which, naturally, didn't exist in the actual covenant. We got cited for chromatic depression because we hadn't repainted our front door its original cheerful yellow color after it had been scuffed by the funeral home staff moving Emma's casket. Brenda's notice explained that the scuff marks constituted visible sadness indicators that needed immediate remediation. We received a violation for unauthorized memorial vehicle presence because the funeral home had left small magnetic memorial ribbons on our cars that read, "In loving memory." According to Brenda, these ribbons violated Section 6.12 regarding approved vehicle decorations and created mobile grief distribution as we drove through the neighborhood. She demanded their immediate removal and included photographs she'd taken of our vehicles, apparently while stalking us during our daily routines. Each notice was more bizarre and cruel than the last, but they all shared critical common features. They were all printed on the same official-looking heavyweight paper. They all referenced specific section numbers that sounded authoritative and legitimate. They all included that same cheap clip art eagle seal that Brenda had purchased for $12.99. And they all imposed immediate, escalating fines ranging from $50 to $250 per day, with stern warnings about accumulating interest and potential foreclosure proceedings if payment wasn't received within 10 business days. Brenda was conducting a carpet bombing campaign of fabricated violations, trying to bury us under an overwhelming avalanche of fees, regulations, and bureaucratic harassment. She was systematically trying to force us to sell our house and move away, to give up and disappear from the community where we'd lived for 8 years. She wanted us gone so she could erase the visible reminder of her crime, eliminate the witnesses to her arrest, and restore her unchallenged authority over the neighborhood she viewed as her personal kingdom. But she was making a critical, ultimately fatal mistake. Every single notice she issued was evidence of criminal harassment. Every fabricated fine she imposed was documented proof of fraud. Every made-up regulation she cited was additional evidence of her systematic abuse of manufactured authority. And we were saving absolutely everything, building a case that would eventually bury her under the weight of her own malicious documentation. Our attorney, Michael Rodriguez, came to review what we'd compiled. He spread the notices across our table, astonished. Atmospheric grief contamination? She fined you for being sad your daughter died? He shook his head. In 22 years, I've never seen anything like this. This is systematic retaliation, evidence of malice. We're filing a restraining order, a civil suit, and talking to the district attorney. Some of this crosses into criminal territory. Michael's investigation uncovered Brenda's entire pattern. I pulled every HOA violation for the past 4 years. Brenda issued 947 citations. Of those, 712 targeted only 43 families. And look at the demographics. 39 are minorities, families with disabled members, single parents, or households that experienced tragedy. She targets the vulnerable. He pulled out stacks of notices. 82% of her citations reference codes that don't exist. She's making them up. Section 7.14, atmospheric grief contamination, not in the bylaws. Section 4.22, insufficient blade vitality, completely fabricated. He showed us the actual White Oak Covenant, 43 pages of standard stuff. Brenda has created an entirely parallel set of regulations that exist only in her imagination. How much money? I asked. She's assessed approximately $340,000 in fines over 4 years. The HOA collected about $180,000, which means residents actually paid these fake fines. Where did it go? Brenda handles all fine collection personally. The HOA treasurer says the amounts don't match. There's about $60,000 unaccounted for. This isn't just harassment. This is fraud. This is theft. Investigators subpoenaed the HOA's financial records and Brenda's bank statements. She'd created a separate account called White Oak Preserve Compliance Fund that she controlled. Fines were deposited, but only portions transferred to the actual HOA. The rest funded vacations, designer clothing, spa treatments, a boat. Her emails were even more damaging. She'd corresponded with designers about creating official-looking badges to add authority to enforcement actions. She'd researched how to collect fines without legal authority. She'd documented her own criminal conspiracy in writing, but Diana's forensic analysis revealed the most damaging evidence. "Look at the metadata," Diana said, pulling up files. This violation notice is dated October 12th, 2 days after Emma's funeral, but it was created October 8th, 4 days before the funeral. 2 days before Emma died, she opened file after file, showing the same pattern. Brenda was creating these violations in advance. She was preparing her retaliation campaign before she even drove onto Emma's burial plot. This wasn't reactive. This was premeditated. The DA took Diana's analysis and combined it with the financial fraud evidence. They had proof of criminal conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, harassment, and witness intimidation. "We're not just going for the funeral incident," Michael told us. "We're going for everything. 4 years of systematic fraud and harassment." The preliminary hearing was supposed to be a routine procedural formality, a quick review of basic evidence to determine if the case could proceed to trial. Instead, it became a spectacular public exposure of everything Brenda had done. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity with the 43 families Brenda had systematically targeted over 4 years, all carrying their violation notices like badges of survival. People stood along the walls because every seat was taken. The air hummed with anticipation and suppressed anger. Brenda sat at the defense table with her high-priced attorney Preston Blackwell, a slick criminal defense specialist who normally defended wealthy white-collar criminals. She was dressed in a conservative navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a modest bun, wearing minimal makeup and simple jewelry. She looked like a respectable professional woman being persecuted by vindictive neighbors. She looked reasonable, sympathetic, wrongly accused. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Blackburn stood to present the state's evidence, carrying a tablet loaded with damning documentation and a leather folder thick with physical evidence. "Your Honor, the defendant, Brenda Hutchins, stands accused of felony desecration of a burial site, criminal harassment, systematic fraud, embezzlement, and witness intimidation. The state will show a 4-year pattern of systematic abuse, financial fraud, and calculated cruelty targeting vulnerable residents." She clicked her remote, and the courtroom's projection screen came to life. Let's begin with the incident that brought this case to light. Diana's funeral video began playing. The sound of Brenda's BMW engine filled the courtroom, followed by the collective gasp of mourners as the tire settled onto Emma's burial plot. Then Brenda's voice, loud and abrasive and utterly devoid of empathy. "Wrap it up. This gathering isn't permitted." The video showed her shushing Father Matthews with a casual finger-to-lips gesture, showed the hazard lights beginning to flash. showed the horror and disbelief on the faces of grieving family members trying to bury an 8-year-old child. When the video ended, the courtroom sat in absolute stunned silence for several long seconds. Judge Patricia Redmond, a stern woman who had presided over hundreds of criminal cases with professional detachment, looked at Brenda with an expression of pure, undisguised disgust that made several people in the gallery shift uncomfortably. "Miss Blackburn," Judge Redmond said quietly, her voice carrying despite its low volume, "please continue with your presentation." Sarah clicked to the next slide, displaying the first violation notice in high resolution. The defendant was arrested at the cemetery and charged with desecration. She was released on $15,000 bail the following day. What happened next demonstrates that the cemetery incident was not an isolated moment of poor judgment or temporary insanity, but rather part of a broader, calculated pattern of harassment and systematic abuse of manufactured authority. She displayed the atmospheric grief contamination citation, and an audible murmur rippled through the packed gallery. 2 days after burying their 8-year-old daughter, the Chen family received this citation from the defendant. She literally fined them for being sad that their child had died. The violation notice claims their emotional atmosphere was creating a psychological burden on neighboring properties and violating community standards for cheerful energy. Judge Redmond removed her reading glasses and stared at the screen in disbelief. "I'm sorry, counsel. Did you just say the defendant fined grieving parents for atmospheric grief contamination?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah said, letting the absurdity sink in. The defendant created an entirely fabricated HOA regulation, printed it on official-looking paper with a fraudulent seal, and used it to fine parents for expressing sadness after their child's death. And this was just the first of 17 such citations issued to the Chin family over the following 2 months, each one more bizarre and cruel than the last. Sarah clicked through slides showing each violation. Lawn melancholy. Memorial display excess. The gallery was whispering, shaking heads. But the Chen family was not unique. Over 4 years, the defendant issued 947 citations. 712 targeted just 43 families, and 82% reference regulations that do not exist. She showed the actual HOA covenant next to Brenda's fabrications. Section 4.22 doesn't exist. The defendant invented insufficient blade vitality, and fined the Chins $100 for violating a regulation that exists only in her imagination. Now let's talk about the money. Bank records appeared on screen. The defendant created the White Oak Preserve Compliance Fund. She collected $180,000 over 4 years. Only $120,000 was transferred to the HOA. The remaining $60,000 was spent on personal expenses, luxury hotel stays, designer purchases, a boat. The defendant used fabricated violations as personal income. Brenda's attorney stood. "Your Honor, these financial matters are complex. Mr. Blackwell, your client took $60,000 and spent it on luxury goods. That's not complex, that's theft. Sit down." Sarah showed the metadata Diana discovered. The defendant's harassment wasn't reactive, it was premeditated. She created violation notices before the funeral, in some cases before the Chen's daughter had even passed away. Judge Redmond removed her glasses. "Miss Blackburn, I've been on the bench 19 years. I have never seen anything as coldly calculated and deliberately cruel as this." She looked at Brenda. "Miss Hutchins, I am finding probable cause for all charges. This case will proceed to trial. Furthermore, I am revoking your bail. You will be remanded to custody." "Your Honor, that's excessive," Brenda's attorney protested. "Your client drove her car onto a child's grave during a funeral, then spent months terrorizing that child's parents with fraudulent documents. She's not a flight risk, Mr. Blackwell. She's a danger to the community. Bail is revoked." Brenda's face crumbled as bailiffs approached. "No, you can't do this. I have authority." "You can't treat me like a criminal." "You are a criminal, Miss Hutchins," Judge Redmond said quietly, "and you're about to discover what happens when the system holds you accountable." As bailiffs led Brenda away, she looked back at us across the courtroom. For just a second, I saw realization in her face. Then she was gone. Diana took my hand. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Not happy. We'd never be truly happy again, but satisfied. Michael leaned over. "That's not how preliminary hearings usually go, but then again, I've never had evidence this comprehensive. The trial was anticlimactic." Sarah presented her case methodically, walking the jury through 4 years of fraud. She showed fake badges, fabricated regulations, embezzled funds, premeditated harassment. She put 43 victims on the stand, each telling their story. The defense tried to argue Brenda was overzealous in enforcing standards, but the evidence was overwhelming. Video of the funeral confrontation, fake badges and documents, bank records showing $60,000 in personal spending. Brenda took the stand against her lawyer's advice. It was a disaster. "Miss Hutchins, can you show the jury where in the official covenant it mentions atmospheric grief contamination?" Sarah asked. Brenda flipped through the document, hands shaking. "It's in the section about standards. Please point to the specific section." She couldn't. "Because it didn't exist. You fined the Chen family for being sad their daughter died. You created a fake regulation. You printed it on fraudulent letterhead. Is that correct?" "I was maintaining standards," Brenda said weakly. "Protecting property values. Grief affects community morale. You terrorized grieving parents," Sarah interrupted. "You drove onto their daughter's grave. You spent months harassing them. Is that maintaining standards?" "I had authority. The community needed someone strong." "What authority?" Sarah held up the covenant. "These rules? Or the rules you invented to justify your cruelty?" Brenda had no answer. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts, 23 separate counts, each carrying significant prison time. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later. Diana and I were given the opportunity to present victim impact statements. "Your Honor," Diana began, her voice clear and controlled, "8 months ago, my daughter Emma died of leukemia. She was 8 years old. She loved art and knock-knock jokes. Losing her destroyed us." Her voice wavered. "We were burying our baby girl, trying to give her a peaceful goodbye. And Brenda Hutchins drove her car onto Emma's grave. She told the priest to wrap it up. She flashed her hazard lights over my daughter's coffin like it was a parking space. And then, when arrested, she spent months torturing us. She fined us for being sad. She cited us for mourning. She created fake regulations specifically to make our grief worse." Diana looked directly at Brenda. "You didn't just break the law. You shattered something sacred. You violated a moment that should have been protected, and you did it for money and power and some twisted sense of authority that existed only in your head. But you didn't count on me documenting everything. You didn't count on my husband's ability to organize evidence. You didn't count on a community that would stand up to you, and you didn't count on a justice system that would hold you accountable." Diana looked back at Judge Redmond. "Brenda Hutchins spent 4 years building a kingdom of cruelty. I'm asking this court to make sure she never has the opportunity to hurt another family the way she hurt ours." I stood next. "Your Honor, I'm a software developer. I fix problems. I debug code, but I can't debug death. I can't write a program that brings Emma back. The only thing I could do was document what Brenda Hutchins did and trust that the system would work. I looked at Brenda. You parked on my daughter's grave. You turned her funeral into a spectacle. Then you spent months trying to break us. But you failed, because every fake citation became evidence. Every fraudulent fine became proof." I turned back to the judge. "Justice is the only thing that makes sense anymore, and I'm asking you to deliver it." 43 victims spoke. One by one, they told stories of harassment, fake fines, manufactured violations, each story built on the last, creating a portrait of systematic abuse. When the last victim had spoken, Judge Redmond looked at Brenda. "Miss Hutchins, do you wish to say anything?" Brenda stood in her orange jumpsuit. "Your Honor, I was trying to maintain standards, protect property values. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just doing my job." Judge Redmond's expression could have frozen fire. "Miss Hutchins, you weren't doing a job. You were running a criminal enterprise. You fabricated regulations, created fake documents, embezzled money, and terrorized vulnerable people. You drove your car onto a child's grave and then spent months torturing her grieving parents." She opened the sentencing document. "I've reviewed the evidence. I've heard from 43 victims. I've seen the videos, the fake badges, the fabricated documents. I've reviewed financial records showing $60,000 in stolen funds. And I've read about atmospheric grief contamination, fining parents for being sad their daughter died." Her voice grew harder. "You spent 4 years building a kingdom of cruelty where you were absolute authority. You targeted the vulnerable, the grieving, the minorities. You used fake power to extract real money and real suffering. And you did it claiming to protect property values." Judge Redmond picked up her gavel. "Property values. That was your justification. You valued property over people. You valued control over compassion. You valued your own authority over basic human decency." She looked Brenda in the eyes. "Let me tell you what I value. I value the rule of law. I value human dignity. I value protecting the vulnerable from people like you. And I value sending a message that abuse of authority will not be tolerated." The gavel hovered. "Brenda Hutchins, I hereby sentence you to 8 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections, no possibility of parole for 4 years. You will also pay full restitution of $60,000 in embezzled funds, plus $240,000 to cover fraudulent fines, plus $100,000 in punitive damages to the Chen family." The gavel came down with a crack that echoed forever. "Furthermore, you are permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position or any position of authority over others. When released, you will be on supervised probation for 10 years with mandatory counseling for narcissistic personality disorder and abuse of authority." Judge Redmond set down her gavel. "Miss Hutchins, you created an empire of cruelty on a foundation of lies. Today, that empire falls. Justice may be slow, but it is thorough, and it has finally arrived for you." Brenda stood frozen. 8 years. The reality hit her all at once. Her legs buckled, and bailiffs caught her arms as she collapsed. They carried her from the courtroom as she sobbed, all her manufactured authority stripped away. The courtroom erupted in applause. Diana and I held each other. We weren't happy we'd never be truly happy again. But we were satisfied. The system had worked. Justice had been delivered. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning when the aspens were just beginning to leaf out and the mountain air carried the scent of new growth and possibility, we stood at the completed Leo Freedom Memorial Garden for Children. The civil settlement with both Brenda and the White Oak Preserve HOA had funded everything, every penny of the $340,000. Judgment had been poured into creating this sanctuary for grieving families, a place where parents could remember their lost children with beauty and peace instead of bureaucratic cruelty and manufactured violations. The garden stretched across nearly half an acre of previously barren cemetery grounds, transformed by landscape architects, grief counselors, and donations from the 43 families into something that felt sacred without being somber. Winding paths made of smooth river stones curved through carefully planned gardens of native Colorado wildflowers, columbines, lupines, Indian paintbrush that would bloom in rotating waves from early spring through late fall. Benches carved from weathered timber offered places to sit and remember, each one sponsored by a family that had suffered under Brenda's tyranny and wanted to create something beautiful from that pain. The centerpiece was a gentle fountain made of stacked native stone, water flowing over smooth rocks with a soft, soothing sound that seemed to whisper comfort. Emma's name was engraved on a bronze plaque mounted on the fountain's base, along with her favorite quote from a children's book she'd read during her hospital stays. "The things we love never truly leave us. They live in the quiet spaces of our hearts and bloom again in unexpected moments." We'd invited all the families who had testified, all 43 households who had suffered under Brenda's manufactured authority and fake regulations. They came dressed in bright colors Emma would have loved, carrying flowers and photographs and personal mementos of the children they'd lost or the grief they'd endured. The gathering felt less like a funeral and more like a celebration, not of death, but of survival, of community reclaimed, of justice finally delivered. Mrs. Morrison arrived carrying her beautiful wind chimes, the ones Brenda had tried to force her to remove, and we hung them from a copper hook on one of the garden's memorial trees. The harmonious tones rang out across the space, blessed by Father Matthews, who had agreed to consecrate the garden. The Patels brought strings of lights that they wove through tree branches, creating gentle illumination for evening visitors. The Johnsons brought colorful pinwheels that their son Tommy had decorated with drawings of Emma, bright spinning flowers that caught the breeze and danced with innocent joy. The Reyes family brought papel picado, traditional Mexican paper decorations in vibrant colors, which we hung along the garden paths in celebration of life, rather than mourning of death. The Goldsteins brought a small stone from Jerusalem and placed it near the fountain, a Jewish tradition honoring sacred space. Each family added something personal, something meaningful, something that transformed the memorial garden from an empty gesture into a living, breathing testament to community and resilience and the power of love to outlast cruelty. Together, all of us who had been targeted and harassed and threatened, we transformed the memorial garden from a professional landscaping project into a genuine sanctuary, a place where the evidence of our survival was written in flowers and stones and flowing water, a place where Brenda's attempts to destroy us had instead created something more beautiful than she could ever understand. Father Matthews stood near the fountain, his prayer book open but unnecessary because the words came straight from his heart. We dedicate this garden to the memory of Emma Chin and all the children who have left us too soon, and to all the families who have suffered loss in whatever form it takes. May this be a place of genuine peace, of deep healing, of remembered love. May families who come here find comfort in beauty, strength in community, and hope in the knowledge that cruelty never gets the final word. May this space stand as living testament to the truth that human compassion is always, always stronger than human cruelty. He closed his prayer book and looked directly at Diana and me, his eyes wet with emotion. Emma's story didn't end with tragedy, or even with justice. It sparked real change in how HOA abuse is prosecuted in this state. It brought dozens of victims out of silence into support. It created this beautiful space where grief is honored rather than punished. That's a powerful legacy for such a young soul. That's transformation that will ripple forward through time. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the paths and flowers and gently flowing fountain, the families began to drift toward the parking area, but not before embracing us, thanking us, telling us their own stories of healing that had begun the day Brenda was finally held accountable. We stayed longer, Diana and I, sitting on a bench near Emma's grave, now permanently part of this larger sacred space. Do you think it's enough? Diana asked quietly, her voice carrying the weight of 6 months of legal battles and emotional processing. All of this, the trial, the sentence, the garden, the policy changes, does any of it balance what we lost? I thought about that question, really considered it, rather than just giving an automatic answer. Nothing balances losing Emma, I said finally. Honestly, nothing makes that remotely okay or acceptable or fair. She should be here. She should be 8 years old and probably arguing with us about bedtime and building elaborate Lego castles and telling terrible knock-knock jokes. Nothing fixes that absence. I gestured at the peaceful garden around us, at the fountain softly bubbling Emma's favorite quote, at the wind chimes singing in the evening breeze. But this means her death wasn't just senseless tragedy. It became catalyst for change. It stopped a tyrant who'd been terrorizing vulnerable families for years. It freed an entire community from fear. It created policy reforms that will protect other families. It built this sanctuary where grief is honored instead of punished. That doesn't balance the loss. But it gives the loss meaning beyond just our family's private pain. Diana leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars Emma used to make elaborate wishes on from her hospital room window during her treatments. The memorial garden grew quiet, peaceful, genuinely serene in a way that felt earned rather than imposed. We sat there as night fully descended and the solar lights along the paths began to glow with soft illumination, creating gentle pathways through the darkness. Somewhere in a Colorado prison, Brenda Hutchins was presumably learning that authority without humanity is just tyranny in a business suit, and tyranny always eventually collapses under the weight of its own cruelty. Somewhere in state legislative offices, policymakers were studying Chen v. Hutchins as a case study, using our documentation and Diana's meticulous database to draft comprehensive legislation preventing future HOA abuse. Somewhere in law schools across Colorado, professors were teaching about our case, showing future attorneys how systematic documentation and persistent adherence to proper legal procedure could bring down even the most entrenched corruption. But here, in this garden, named after our daughter, there was just peace. Just sacred memory, just love that refused to be regulated, fined, or intimidated into silence. The wind chimes rang softly, their harmonious tones carrying across the memorial grounds without any citations for discordant frequencies. No fines for unauthorized remembrance activities. No tyrant with a fake badge trying to control how people grieved or loved or remembered their losses. Just a garden, just a community healed and healing, just justice, finally and completely served. I stood up and placed one last rose on Emma's grave, white this time, symbolizing peace and purity and the innocence of a child who never got to grow up. Sleep well, baby girl. I whispered into the darkness, my voice breaking slightly. You're safe now. You're surrounded by beauty. And because of you, because of what happened and how we fought back, a lot of other families are safe too. That's your real memorial, not just this beautiful garden with your name on it, but the actual change you inspired, the justice you brought, the courage you gave us to fight back when we thought we had nothing left, the community you helped heal, the laws that will be written because of your story. The rose settled gently against the headstone, white petals glowing in the soft moonlight filtering through the aspen leaves. Somewhere far above in the vast Colorado night sky, I like to imagine Emma smiling down at us, proud of her mom and dad for turning impossible grief into concrete purpose, for transforming tragedy into genuine triumph, for converting Brenda's cruelty into compassion that would help countless other families. The memorial garden stood as undeniable proof that love is infinitely stronger than hate, that justice is more powerful than manufactured authority, that kindness outlasts cruelty, and that sometimes the most beautiful, meaningful things in the world grow from the darkest soil imaginable. Atmospheric grief, contamination. That's what Brenda had called it in her fake citation, her cruel, absurd attempt to regulate and punish sadness itself. The idea that our mourning was a violation of community standards, something to be fined and controlled and eliminated. But grief isn't contamination. It's love that has nowhere to go after loss. It's evidence of deep connection, of a relationship that mattered, of a life that changed the world just by existing in it for 8 short, beautiful years. And in the end, through months of careful documentation and persistent legal action, our grief became something else entirely. It became systematic evidence. It became courtroom testimony. It became justice delivered. It became this peaceful garden where other grieving families could find sanctuary without fear of citations or harassment or fake authority figures with $12.99 badges claiming power they never possessed. Emma's true legacy wasn't the contamination Brenda tried to claim it was. Her legacy was transformation of grief into action, of pain into purpose, of one family's tragedy into systemic reform that will protect vulnerable families throughout Colorado from similar abuse. And Brenda Hutchins, sitting in her prison cell with her fake badges confiscated and her manufactured authority permanently stripped away, had learned far too late that you cannot regulate genuine love, cannot find authentic compassion, and cannot intimidate or destroy justice when it finally arrives with proper documentation and legal authority. We walked out of the memorial garden hand in hand as the last visitors departed and the night deepened around us, forever changed by loss, but no longer broken by grief or destroyed by harassment. The legal system had worked exactly as it was designed to work. The evidence we'd carefully compiled had mattered enormously. The receipts we'd meticulously kept had built an unassailable case, and somewhere in the quiet autumn night, somewhere among the stars and aspens and gently flowing water, Emma's memory shone bright and eternal, unmarred by tyranny, protected by love, honored by the beautiful space that would forever bear her name and provide comfort to families walking the same difficult path of loss we'd walked.